Hi guys, welcome to Multiverse. Today we're going to talk about Crisis on Earth X. For those of you who may not know, Crisis on Earth X is the CW crossover between Supergirl, Arrow, The Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow. So basically, it's a 4-hour TV movie, sort of. And there's also an animated movie that is supposed to cross over with the Crisis on Earth X crossover. It's going to be called Freedom Fighters: The Ray, but I couldn't find an official date when it's going to be released. All I know is that it's going to be released sometimes in December. I think it's going to be in early December, but keep an eye out for that animated film. Basically, if you look on YouTube, you can see the trailer for the animated film, and it looks really sweet. I would be tempted to show part of the trailer in here, but odds are my video will get flagged if I do that. Although I'm going to use some evil words in this video, so odds are my video will get flagged anyway. But I'm trying to minimize the problem. So before I get started and I give out a lot of spoilers, because I'm warning you there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this video. Before we start the spoilers, I will just give my overall impression to give you an idea if you should watch it or not. It's the best Supergirl episode, it's the best Arrow episode, it's the best Flash episode, it's the best Legends of Tomorrow episode we've got this year so far, and that we got in a long time. Although, for Arrow, the episodes with Deathstroke were pretty darn good, but for pretty much all the other shows, this is pretty much by far the best shows we've got since the start of this new season. There's always been a big part of teen drama and those TV shows, and this year it seems they've doubled down on that. It was even worse than the previous seasons, which sadly pretty much divides the fan base. Like, I know a lot of DC fans who don't want to watch those shows because of the teen drama, and I cannot blame them. It always feels a bit weird to see, especially those characters. Like, a lot of those characters are like in their mid 20s or even early 30s, or even in some cases like in their 50s, like Harrison Wells. And it's always weird to see those characters act like 12 years old more often than not. So in order to be able to appreciate those shows, sadly, you have to pretty much make abstraction of that. And sadly, I know a lot of people who get turned off automatically by all the teen drama that those TV shows have, and they still had some teen drama in the 4-part crossover, but by far the action adventure far outweighed the teen drama in this case. Like previously in Arrow or in the Flash, the action adventure was way much more than the teen drama. Like, there was a bit of teen drama, but there was so much action adventure that you could ignore the teen drama and just focus on the action adventure and love the show for that. But sadly, as time went on, in the previous season or two, they pretty much increased the teen drama or some of the agendas that they seem to have with those TV shows. So it made it a bit more difficult to watch and enjoy those TV shows. Although whenever those shows were great, they were really great. So usually that made up for some of the shows that relied more heavily on the teen drama. But this season they really doubled down on a lot of the teen drama somehow. And the exception to that probably would be Arrow. Arrow pretty much came back to how it was around the time of season 3, the end of season 2, the start of season 3 maybe. But with the crossover Crisis on Earth X, the action adventure pretty much was back, at least in that crossover. Yeah, there is a whole bunch of drama. I will talk more about that in the spoiler section. But basically, if you're a big DC fan, you're gonna want to watch that show, that crossover anyway. And if you're on the fence, yeah, like if you're a DC fan but you're still on the fence about those TV shows, I would strongly suggest watch at least the Crisis on Earth X crossover. It's going to be worth it. Of course, if all that teen drama that they always have bothers you, you're gonna have to try a bit to try to ignore it. But some of the action sequences are really well done. Although there were a few actions, you have to remember that this is a TV series and they're working with a TV budget. But holy crap, they with some of the sequences they did a really good job within the budget that they had. which is also another reason I think why this season I had a hard time enjoying Supergirl or Flash or Arrow or even Legends of Tomorrow, because there were a few episodes where it was painfully obvious that they had spent barely a handful of nickels to produce those TV shows. That often happens. Originally, I thought that maybe they were saving. Sometimes they'll do one episode for very cheap to try to save some money for another episode that will require more money. For example, if they were planning, let's say, to use Grodd in one episode, well, using Grodd means spending a lot of money on the visual effects. So before that, they had like one or two maybe filler episodes that you could tell that they did for a handful of quarters. And at first, I thought, okay, maybe they were saving money for Grodd, or maybe they were saving money for something later down the line. And I would have to say they were saving for later down the line. They were saving for the Crisis on Earth X crossover because they really went beyond what they usually do with those TV shows. In terms of the cast, they had a huge cast, and they were able to bring back a lot of characters from the previous seasons that we hadn't seen in a long time. But also they brought back a Firestorm. Like we hadn't seen Firestorm in quite a few episodes of Legends of Tomorrow, and that's what I mean. Basically, Firestorm is an expensive part of the Legends of Tomorrow TV show. So for a few episodes, we barely saw Firestorm, or we didn't see him at all. And I understand now why, because they were saving pretty much for this crossover. So I do understand that there are a lot of people, even big DC fans, who don't want to watch the CW TV shows. But I would strongly suggest, in this case, at least in the case of the Crisis on Earth X crossover, you can watch all 4 episodes, and you should be able to find at least something you will like. Whether it's going to be the action, whether it's going to be the alternate history with the evil Nazis who took over Earth X. Like if you're a fan of the series The Man in the High Castle, you will get your kick watching the Crisis on Earth X crossover. So I would strongly suggest, even if you're not a fan of the CW TV shows, but if you're a DC fan, give the Crisis on Earth X crossover a try. You may really enjoy it. And for my case, it's the best episodes we've got this year. And I thought it was even better than the crossover we got last year. Although from what I can see, the ratings aren't quite as high as they were last year. So I guess Nazis aren't as popular as they used to be, which is a bit of a shame, I suppose. Personally, I love whenever they use Nazis. Nazis are the best bad guys you can use in either a film or a TV show. You don't need to explain who they are or why they're evil. They're Nazis. That explains everything by itself. The only thing you have to explain, like in the case of the Crisis on Earth X crossover, is why somehow the Nazi seems to be ruling the world. But other than that, the Nazis are great villains who require no explanation. You just make them Nazis, and you have your evil bad guys. They're the best bad guys you can use in anything. So again, I would strongly recommend that you watch the Crisis on Earth X crossover. So I'm going to stop with that because I keep on repeating myself. So there will be spoilers after this point. So if you do not want to be spoiled at all, stop listening right now, go watch the crossover, and then come back afterwards, and then we can discuss what happens in the crossover. Technically, the first episode is the Supergirl episode, and it starts the best way possible. It shows you Earth X, and it shows you that the evil Nazis are ruling the world. But even though they're ruling the world, there is still some resistance. You can see some resistance fighters that are preparing for something. We're not sure what exactly. They're talking about themselves about something that's upcoming, but they don't really tell us why. And then obviously the evil Nazis attack them and pretty much slays all of them. And then we see the Guardian of Earth X. For those who may not know, Guardian in the Supergirl TV show is Jimmy Olsen. And it is Jimmy Olsen also in this case. And they even gave him a shield reminiscent of the original shield that Captain America had. Guardian also used a version of that shield in certain DC comics, but I'm pretty sure that was like a wink at the original shield that Captain America was using. And that's one of the best bit about this crossover, is that there's like a billion Easter egg. If you're a comic fan and you have a pretty big knowledge of the comics, not just the DC comics, even the Marvel comics. If you have a big knowledge of movies in general or even TV shows, you're going to see a billion of Easter eggs. Even if you never saw a single episode of Arrow or Supergirl or The Flash, there are still plenty of Easter eggs that have nothing to do with those shows. Although there are quite a few references to previous episodes in the CW TV shows. But again, if you didn't see those shows, you won't really care about those references. But there's quite a lot of other references about a whole bunch of other stuff that even if you never saw a CW TV show, you will get those references. And in this episode, basically, what we have is the preparation for the wedding of Barry Allen and Iris West. If you saw some of the promo material, you probably know that already. So pretty much everyone is preparing for the wedding. And at the start, there's even those vignettes where you see the various characters wondering if they're going to go to the wedding. Like basically, we see a first vignette where the Flash is fighting a killer shark, and there's Iris bugging him about the fact that there are some people who still didn't reply whether they were going to the wedding. And then we see various vignettes. So we see vignettes with Arrow, where Arrow is fighting some evil ninjas, and then Felicity reminds him that they still didn't answer whether they're going to Barry and Iris's wedding. So she asks him if they're going, and Arrow obviously says, "Nah, well, of course we're going." So then she replies that they're going. There's even Supergirl. Supergirl is let's say feeling a little down with her sister, and at first they don't really want to go to the wedding, and then they decide that to heck with it. And Supergirl opens a portal, and they say, let's go to the wedding. Enough clowning around. We're going to the wedding. And then we see the Legends of Tomorrow characters who pretty much are impersonating Robin Hood, or so it seems. Robin Hood and his merry band, and they too are discussing like, oh, did we reply to Iris about whether we were going to the wedding or not? And so during the fight, they still talk about whether they're going or not to the wedding and whether they actually replied. And so they try to end the fight quickly so that they can go and prepare for the wedding. And basically, a whole bunch of the episode is about the wedding. Either the ladies who are getting some beauty treatment for the wedding, or even the preparation for the wedding itself, or even the wedding, at least the start of the wedding itself. My favorite character at the wedding has to be Heatwave. Holy crap, he cracked me up throughout the whole bit. He's one of my favorite characters in those shows nowadays. I remember when he first appeared on The Flash, I wasn't too sure about the guy because he was over the top quite a bit. But then I got used to how over the top he was, and especially seeing him in Legends of Tomorrow, I grew to really love the character. And in here, whenever he comes to the wedding, and then a lady asks him, "Are you sitting with the groom or the bride?" And then he remembers that, oh yeah, I tried to kill the groom a couple of times, so maybe I should sit on the side of the bride. And then they sit him next to Captain Singh, and at first Singh isn't too sure if he recognizes him or not because Heatwave is an evil villain, and Singh had to arrest him once or twice. So at first, Singh is not too sure if he recognizes him, and Heatwaves, of course, has to tell him that he doesn't like Cop. And after they defeat all the evil Nazis at the wedding, Heatwave, of course, says, "Best wedding ever," and that's exactly what you would expect him to say. And holy crap! And the way he delivers the line, it cracks me up every time. And at the wedding, we were able to see a lot of characters that we hadn't seen in quite a while. Like basically, we saw Martin Stein's wife, whom we hadn't seen for like 2 years or something. It had been a long time since we had seen her. We saw Martin Stein's also daughter, whom we saw last year, I think. She was like one of the time anomalies that were created, but somehow they decided not to correct that specific anomaly. So she's still around, and she even had a son. So Martin Stein has a grandson. Although sadly, Martin Stein goes through that whole bit where he says, "Oh, only 7 days before I retire." You know that bit. And sadly, that doesn't end too well because of that. But we'll talk about that a bit later. So basically, you have Martin Stein who keeps on reminiscing about how he's going to spend time with the family, and they're going to break up a Firestorm, and he's going to spend time with his grandson, and which sadly doesn't bode well for the poor guy. Apparently, one of the reasons why they decided to, let's say, to make some changes with his character is because basically the actor playing the character wants to go focus more into play acting or something like that. So it's sad, but it happens. So as I mentioned, then some evil Nazi burst into the wedding, and of course there's this huge fight with everybody, and holy crap, it was an awesome sequence and an awesome action piece. And again, once Heatwave realizes that Caitlin Snow is Killer Frost, right there and then he goes like, "Oh, that's what I'm talking about," and he cracks me up every time he opens his mouth. So you have this huge cast that's fighting all each other, and after once the fight settles, they find a way to get rid of some characters. Like basically, everyone gets evacuated out of the room, obviously, but also they find a way to get rid of Joe's girlfriend, and Wally. Basically, they use that excuse that they ask Wally to protect the family, and that Joe is probably in danger or something. So he asks Wally to take Joe and Cecile to safety so that they're no longer in danger. So even though they had this huge cast, the cast could have been even much bigger, but they found ways for some of the characters not to be there. Like for example, some of the characters somehow were not invited to the wedding or could not go to the wedding for reasons. Like you had Diggle from Arrow, who is wounded currently in the Arrow TV show. Not quite wounded, but recovering from some nerve damage he has. So they found that way to keep him out of the crossover. But then again, they found a way to include him still despite that. But and so they found a way to get rid of Wally so that they would have only one speedster on the team. But at last, for the first time in a long time, we saw Firestorm. It had been so long since we saw Firestorm that when I saw Martin and Jackson grab each other's hand uh, and turn into Firestorm, I like, oh yeah, I was really happy about that. So they pretty much defeat the evil Nazis. The Nazis pretty much retreat, although they manage to capture the Earth X version of Prometheus. And also, the episode pretty much ends with the reveal that the evil Archer is the Earth X version of Oliver Queen, and Overgirl is the evil version of Supergirl. And of course, we get the reveal that the speedster they have is not an evil version of Barry Allen, it's actually Eobard Thawne. And not just Eobard Thawne, but Eobard Thawne from Earth 1. The Eobard Thawne that's wearing the Harrison Wells face, and the very same Eobard Thawne that we had in the first season of The Flash. Basically, that seems to be how they found a way to bring him back. And holy crap, I was so happy to see him again. Because in the first season of The Flash, Eobard Thawne pretending to be Harrison Wells was by far my favorite character on the show. I loved the whole mystery, especially at first. At first, you wonder like, okay, who's that guy that they added to the team, quote unquote? Like this guy on a wheelchair? Are they trying to recreate some sort of Professor X type character that would be like the leader of the team or something? And then there was the whole mystery around him. There was the whole mystery around the man in the yellow suit, which it turns out that he was the man in the yellow suit. He was the Reverse Flash, and holy crap, did he do such a good job? Because he did such a good job in being the sinister Reverse Flash, but also he did such a good job being the likable Harrison Wells. As Harrison Wells, he was likable. He was bright. He wasn't an evil mustache twirling villain. He had a full personality, and seeing him again made me really happy. And at first, you could have thought that it was the Eobard Thawne from Earth X, but no, they actually revealed that he was the Eobard Thawne from Earth One. I'm not sure how they're going to explain him surviving being killed by the Flash. Uh, I suspect they won't really explain it. They'll just explain that somehow he was in Earth X, or maybe they'll use some sort of time remnant thingy. But I was really happy to see that character again. Even though we still have Harrison Wells, we still had Harrison Wells from season to season. It never was quite the same as having the Harrison Wells that was Eobert Thawne pretending to be Harrison Wells. And when they did manage to bring him back in season two, there was this one episode where Barry had to go back in time because he had to get some information from Eobert Thawne. And again, it was one of those episodes where I was really happy to see what was my favorite character in the first season of The Flash, and I was very happy to see him again. And the second part of the Earth X crossover is the Arrow episode. And it starts with a pretty big reveal. It starts with the reveal of who is Prometheus. And it turns out that Prometheus is Tommy Merlin from Earth X. And at first, Tommy plays a bit with Oliver. Obviously, is a bit unbalanced by that, and he asks to have some alone time with his friend. And at first, Tommy plays a bit with that. He tries to pretend that if he doesn't do what the evil Oliver wants, his parents will be killed or something like that. But then it turns out that he was only playing with him, and he's actually as evil as the evil Oliver. And sadly, he decides to take his own life, like a good evil soldier. He takes some poison, and that's the end of the evil Merlin, the evil Tommy Merlin. Sadly. Then after that, there's a bit of that teen drama I mentioned. Basically, during the wedding or before the wedding, Oliver was toying with the idea of him and Felicity also getting married. Felicity said she didn't want to get married, and then they go back over that again, like, why don't you want to get married? I want to get married. Do you want to get married? So yeah, there's a whole bit of teen drama that you have to try to ignore. But there's a pretty cool face-off between Oliver, Supergirl, and the Flash versus the evil Oliver, the evil Supergirl called Overgirl, and the Harrison Wells Eobert Thawne, which I think is called the Blitzkrieg Flash in that version, as opposed to the Reverse Flash, which kind of works. And just before the face-off, basically you have the Flash who arrives at super speed. You have Supergirl who arrives because she flies really fast. And then you have Oliver who arrives a bit later, and you can see them almost a bit bored or waiting for him. Like Supergirl starts whistling while they're waiting. And then you see Oliver arrive with his motorcycle. And then he has to take a second to explain to them that, listen, super speed, I don't have it. And they say, oh yeah, we'll understand. And the face-off between the characters was pretty cool. We find out that Oliver has some kryptonite arrows. And Supergirl asks him, why'd you have that? And then Oliver tells her that, well, I have that exactly in the case that some evil version of you appears or something like that. So it was a pretty sweet moment. Sadly, they used the old trick that the evil villains put some civilians in danger. So while the heroes stop to pretty much save lives, save the civilians' lives, like there's this building in construction, and the building is about to fall apart. So they have to work together to try to keep the building apart, and while they also save the people in the building. And of course, while they do that, the evil version of themselves manage to go away. But of course, they manage to track where the evil villains went. So they go back to try to this time to be on the offensive and to attack the evil villains. But of course, it was a bit of a trap. While they attacked the evil villain lair, the villains themselves actually managed to take over Star Labs, which was pretty much their plan all along. Basically, they need Star Labs and they need Supergirl because poor Overgirl is dying from solar radiation. Basically, she absorbed too much solar radiation, and now she's dying because of that. And she needs a new heart, so they're going to use Supergirl to give a new heart to Overgirl. So I mentioned that there was a lot of Easter eggs in that crossover. Basically, the whole bit with Overgirl being overcharged with solar radiation and pretty much dying. It's a bit that they borrowed from Superman, from All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. Basically, in that story, Superman went too close to the sun, absorbed too much solar energy, and sadly, he has cancer, basically. So it's a bit that they've borrowed from there. So when I mentioned that there was a lot of Easter eggs, That's one of those. That's an example of that. And while Heatwave is fighting the evil Nazis that are trying to take over Star Labs, basically he's fighting the evil version of Oliver. Previously, he had a little chat with Caitlin Snow, and basically he was wondering how she transforms into Killer Frost. And Caitlin had explained that she transforms when she's scared or something like that. So you see Heatwave basically ask, "Are you scared yet?" And evil Oliver obviously thinks he's talking to him, so he says, "I'm not scared." And then Heatwave says, "I wasn't talking to you." And then there's a Killer Frost who jumps into the melee and who fights the evil Oliver. Sadly, she's no match for the evil Oliver, and he pretty much defeats her. And the evil Nazis manage to capture Star Labs. And at the evil villain lair, again, the evil Nazis manage to pretty much capture everyone. Also, at the fight at the villain lair versus the evil Nazis, we see the Earth X version of Metallo, and as much as they did a good job when they added Killer Shark to the Flash TV show, as much as they did a good job when they created the Grodd again for the Flash TV show, this version of Metallo is 10 kinds of awful. Sadly, that's where you can see that they have limitations. They don't have, obviously it's a TV show, as I mentioned previously, they don't have the same budget as movies, and it shows. Metallo is probably the most obvious example that they didn't have the budget to realize Metallo properly. They tried anyway, and sadly they fell way short. But again, you have to understand that it's a TV show. They don't have the budget for those kind of effects, so you can forgive them a little bit. But sadly, they probably shouldn't have overextended themselves, but sometimes that happens. And of course, at the end of the fight, once all the heroes are captured, our friend Eobard Thawne cannot help himself. He has to gloat. He has to show that he's very happy to have won the fight. And basically, he's monologuing, as they say in The Incredibles. So the episode pretty much ends with all the heroes defeated. Those who were at Star Labs, trying to defend Star Labs, get locked up into the pretty much containment units that Cisco created years ago. And those who were defeated at the evil villain lair somehow ends up on Earth X in some sort of concentration camp. And that's pretty much how this episode ends. So part 3 is the Flash part of the crossover. It starts with the heroes being locked up in a concentration camp. And it turns out that the person who seems to be running the camp is Quentin Lance from Earth X. And of course, once he sees Sarah Lance, he cannot help but remember his daughter. And it turns out that he actually executed his daughter from Earth X years ago, and he's looking forward to doing so again. So they pretty much take all the heroes, they take them next to some sort of trench, and they're about to execute all of them. And the heroes cannot do anything because they have these collars that pretty much prevents them from using their powers, so they're pretty much defenseless. And when they actually did try to fight off the evil Nazis before they were about to get shot, but Quentin Lance had this gizmo that pretty much allowed them to electrify the heroes thanks to the collars they were wearing. Like basically there's Oliver and Sarah Lance who also were wearing those collars, and they wondered why they had collars. Like it made sense for Barry to have a collar because he had super speed. It made sense for Jackson and Stein to have a collar so that they don't turn into Firestorm. But why did Sarah Lance have a collar? Why did Oliver Queen have a collar? It turns out that it did more than just stop them from using the powers. Also, it was some sort of electrical device that Quentin Lance could use to electrify them if they tried any sort of funny business. So they try to resist a bit. They get electrified a bit. And so just before they finally get shot by the evil Nazis, there's Captain Cold from Earth X who comes in and rescues them. And also in the group, there's one of the prisoners that was in the camp with them. We don't really know who he is at first, and then it turns out that it is the Ray. Basically, it's the character that you're going to see in the animated film, or what I assume will be the main character, seeing how the animated film is called Freedom Fighters The Ray. So I suspect the movie will pretty much revolve around him, and this is where we see him for the first time. So Captain Cold brings them back to the Resistance, and it turns out that Windshot from Earth X is the general of the Resistance. And they have this plan where they're going to blow up basically the portal that the heroes need to go back to Earth 1. Windshot is going to blow up that portal because basically Overgirl is on Earth 1, the evil Green Arrow is on Earth 1, Eobert is on Earth 1. They're all on Earth 1, and they want to close the portal so that they cannot come back to Earth X. Obviously, our heroes don't want to let that happen because they want to go save Earth 1 as well. But Windshot is pretty much determined to save his Earth, even if it means dooming the Earth 1, dooming the other Earth. And while all that happens, they try to prepare Supergirl so that they can transfer her heart into Overgirl. But Felicity Smokes and Iris West manage to slow down their plan by pretty much shutting down the power. So back to our heroes on Earth X. They try to argue with Windshot, trying to convince him to give them more time so that they can go through the portal and then he could destroy it. Alex Danvers tries to convince him. She tries to tell him that on Earth, him and Supergirl are very close, are the best friends, and he's like family, and that doesn't convince him at all. But somehow, I'm not sure what Captain Cold managed to tell him. Basically, off screen, Captain Cold's managed to convince Windshot to give them at least a bit of time so that they can try to cross through the portal. So Windshot decides to give them 1 hour, and then he's going to blow up the portal. So they come up with this plan where basically, because where the portal is, there's like a huge army of Nazis protecting the portal. But they managed to come up with some plan that allows them to at least slip through some of the evil Nazis. Basically, what they end up doing is that they end up using Oliver, and they pretend that he's the evil Oliver from Earth X. So when the Nazis see him, obviously they let him pass through. But of course, poor Oliver, Quentin Lance is not so easily fooled. Basically, Quentin Lance gives him a gun, and he shows him Felicity Smokes from Earth X, and he tells him to shoot her. And of course, Oliver cannot do that, so they start fighting because obviously Quentin Lance sort of suspected that he wasn't quite the evil Oliver. So it won't be so easy for our heroes. They actually have to fight the evil Nazis in order to be able to cross through the portal. But even worse is that Windshot decides not to give them the time he agreed to give them. Basically, he agreed to give them 1 hour. And he decides that, nah, he's not going to wait. He decides to send his weapon in order to destroy the portal right now, even though our heroes didn't cross just yet. And we find out that the weapon that Windshot is using is Red Tornado from Earth X. So basically you have Barry and the Ray decide to try to slow down Red Tornado so that the rest of the team can manage to take control of the portal and activate it and defeat all the evil Nazis. And in the end they end up destroying poor Red Tornado, but they do manage to be able to defeat all the Nazis. But in order to be able to open the portal, poor Martin Stein pretty much has to sacrifice himself. And at first he gets shot in the back. And then you see Stein pretty much fall down. You think maybe he might be dead. Did they kill Martin Stein? Stay tuned and we'll find out in the next episode. And the last part of the crossover is the Legends of Tomorrow episode. So last episode ended with Martin Stein getting shot in the back. We think that, is he dead? Is he not dead? Maybe he's dead. Turns out he's not really dead. Even though he was shot in the back, even though you can see like 10 liters of blood surrounding Martin Stein because he bled a lot, he still manages to get back up. He gets shot even a couple more times, and one more time at least. And then he manages to pull a lever that opens up the portal to Earth 1. And as the portal opens, it also somehow destroys all the evil Nazis that were surrounding the portal. So they managed to pretty much win the day thanks to Martin's sacrifice. Although he's not quite dead just yet. He's almost dead, but he's not dead yet. It was a bit sad because it kind of cheapened the end of the previous episode, where if they had ended that there with Martin Stein being dead, it would have had a bit more impact. But basically, they didn't want him to be dead just yet. They had a couple of more scenes they wanted to do with the character. But when you see him getting back up, and then when you see basically Sarah Lance, is it Sarah Lance or one of the characters saying that he's critical, but he's not quite dead yet, and then they figure that the Wave Rider, Gideon on the Wave Rider, will be able to patch him up, and he'll be good as new. And a good chunk of the episode is pretty much devoted to that. They're on the Wave Rider. Gideon cannot really save Martin Stein, but somehow Martin Stein is still alive because of his link with Jackson. Basically, his link to Jefferson Jackson is the only thing keeping him alive. So earlier in the crossover, Cisco and Harrison Wells had managed to create basically an antidote to Firestorm. They created this potion that if they drink it, it's going to pretty much sever the link between him and Martin Stein. And Martin Stein knows that basically he knows that he's dying. And at first, Jefferson doesn't want to let him go. He wants to stay linked with Martin Stein because Jefferson is the only thing keeping Martin Stein alive. But Martin Stein is worried that he may end up killing Jefferson. So there's this whole bit of drama where Martin Stein doesn't want Jefferson to die. Jefferson doesn't want Martin Stein to die. So Stein manages to convince Jefferson to give him basically the potion that Cisco came up with earlier in the crossover, and Stein drinks the potion, which effectively severs the link between him and Jefferson Jackson, and that's the end of Martin Stein. Obviously, Jackson stays with him until the end, but then once Sarah comes by to see how Stein is doing, obviously Stein is gone, and Jefferson goes to tell Clarissa and Stein's daughter, I forget her name. He goes to tell the bad news that Stein won't be coming back. So again, you understand why they didn't kill him right at the start of the episode. They wanted to stretch that so that you had this big scene between Jefferson and Stein arguing about saving. Jefferson wanted to keep Stein alive. Stein didn't want Jefferson to die as well. So that's pretty much why they didn't kill him, kill Stein on the spot. But it did allow us to have Firestorm at the start of the episode one last time. You have to wonder what they're going to do with Jefferson Jackson now. Basically, Stein earlier had created some sort of potion that could give Jefferson Jackson some sort of Spider-Man-like powers, like powers where he could stick to walls. And there's a whole bit about that also. Like there's the whole bit between Jackson and Stein where Jackson says, "What, you want to turn me into Spider-Man?" And then Stein goes, "No, I don't want to. You won't have the strength of 10 men." And basically starts telling the actual stats of Spider-Man that you could almost find in the Marvel Handbook. So again, Jefferson goes like, "Will I have the spider sense or something like that?" And Stein tells him, "No, you're just going to be able to stick to wall." And then Jefferson says something like, "What? I'm going to be the spectacular sticky man or something like that." Forget the actual name. And then Stein tells him, "No, I'm sure Cisco can find you a much better name than that." So the whole bit between the two was pretty fun when they were talking about Spider-Man. So sadly, Stein is gone, and Jefferson Jackson has no powers. And I don't think he's going to take the Spider-Man potion that Stein came up with. I suspect that later down the line, they'll find some reason for Jefferson Jackson to either have all the Firestorm powers to himself, or they'll find someone else to be the second half of Firestorm. I guess we're going to have to wait and see for that bit. So after that whole drama, we prepare for pretty much the final confrontation. So basically, on the ground, you have all the heroes versus all the evil Nazis. And in the air, you have the Wave Rider, and you have an evil Nazi version of the Wave Rider. So basically, you have everyone fighting on the ground. And in the air, you have this aerial battle between the Wave Rider and the evil Nazi Wave Rider. And for some reason, Supergirl is on the Wave Rider, although she's pretty sick, so that's pretty much why, I suppose. Basically, she's slowly dying because of her radiation poisoning. And they have this scene where we have Supergirl outside of the evil Wave Rider, and she tells the evil Overgirl, care to step outside, General, because Overgirl is a general in the evil Nazi army. So basically, they're redoing somewhat the scene between Christopher Reeves and evil Zod from Superman 2, where Christopher Reeves says to Zod, "You want to step outside, General?" So it was a nice nod. Again, there's a whole bunch of Easter eggs throughout the whole crossover, and I barely gave you just a handful of those, but there's so many more in the crossover. So if you love Easter eggs, movie references, or even references to comics, you're going to have a lot of fun watching that crossover. But even without that, uh, basically the action pieces are really well done. There's maybe one where they're fighting Metallo that is not that great, but that's probably the weakest part of the action sequences. But overall, the action scenes are pretty good, especially considering that it's a TV show with a TV budget, so they didn't have that much money for visual effects, and with whatever money they had, they did a really good job overall. So of course, the evil Overgirl fights a Supergirl, and the evil Wave Rider fights the Wave Rider. Obviously, the Wave Rider manages to blow up the evil Wave Rider. They come up with this sort of convoluted plan where they manage to get some people on board of the evil Wave Rider. They push a big red button to deactivate the shield, and then Cisco get them out, and then they shoot the evil Wave Rider. And then Supergirl, as she's fighting Overgirl, eventually Overgirl reaches critical mass and she's about to explode. So obviously, Supergirl grabs her, brings her into outer space, and Overgirl explodes in outer space. And Supergirl obviously falls down towards the Earth, but Commander Steel manages to catch her just before she falls. So instead of falling on the Earth, which is hard Earth, she falls into hard metal, which is Commander Steel when he transforms into metal. Doesn't make a lick of sense, but this is comics. So basically, he caught her, so he was able to save her, as opposed to her just smashing down the ground. And when the evil Oliver sees that Overgirl exploded, he says to Oliver, "I'm going to kill you!" But Oliver is quicker on the draw, and Oliver kills his evil doppelganger from Earth X. And that's pretty much almost all it ends. There's also a scene between Barry and Reverse Flash, where basically you see Barry that's vibrating his hand. You think he's going to do what Reverse Flash did a few times, pretty much passing his hand through someone's heart and pretty much killing them. But Barry cannot do it. Barry being Barry, he cannot just kill the Reverse Flash, and he decided to let him go. He tells him, "Just go." You have to wonder why he did let him go. Well, you don't really wonder, you know why, but it doesn't really make any sense for him to let him go. He could have contained him in Star Labs, but somehow he decided to just let him go. I strongly suspect that he lets him go so that Eeyore Bird Thawne, Reverse Flash, will be able to be part of the Hall of Doom, the Legion of Doom. Basically, there's this Legion of Doom that's being formed in Legends of Tomorrow, and I strongly think that the Reverse Flash will be part of that. So far, in the Legion of Doom, we have what's his name? We have Damien Dark, and we have Gorilla Grodd, and we have Damien Dark's daughter. I forget what her name is. And obviously now they're going to have the evil Reverse Flash with them obviously. And then they have the funeral for Martinstein, but that's not quite how the episode ends. Somehow, basically, you have Barry and Iris with Oliver and Felicity, and basically they're wondering like, are they going to do another wedding, and when are they going to do that other wedding? And Barry and Iris decides, no, we already had our ceremony. Next time we'll just go in front of a minister or something, and we'll get married, and that's it. And then they have an idea, like they ask Oliver, "Hey Oliver, you're a mayor. You could marry us." But somehow they would have to be in Star City for Oliver to be able to marry them for some reason. But somehow they remember that Diggle got ordained to marry his brother. I'm not sure if it was mentioned before. I really don't remember, but either it was mentioned before and I forgot, or they just made that on the spot so that they could get married. And also, it gives them a reason to include Diggle in the crossover. So Barry goes all the way to Star City, grabs Diggle, brings him back, and there's always this running gag whenever Barry carries Diggle at super speed. Diggle ends up barfing. And here, for a few seconds, you have Diggle who goes like, "Oh, at least this time I didn't vomit," and then he turns around and he actually does it. So it turns out that Diggle is going to marry the Flash. He's going to marry Barry and Iris. But as they're about to say their vows, Felicity decides that she also wants to get married to Oliver. Even though earlier in the crossover, when Oliver pretty much brought up the question, she didn't want to do it. But then after all the what they went through, then she decides that yeah, let's do it. So at the end, not only does Barry and Iris get married, but Oliver and Felicity also get married. And that is pretty much it. That is how the Crisis on Earth X crossover ends. So basically, there's quite a few changes to the status quo. I guess I wasn't really expecting Oliver to get married with Felicity in this episode. I guess I thought it would be something they would do maybe later down the line, but seeing them decide to do it in this episode was quite a surprise. Of course, you have to wonder how that's going to affect the Arrow TV show. How's William going to react to that and all that good stuff? I guess we're gonna have to wait and see for that. So overall, it was a great crossover. It was by far the best episodes of all those shows, except maybe Arrow. Arrow, a couple of weeks ago, we had the Deathstroke episode, two-parter. The two-parter with Deathstroke was all kinds of awesome. I almost made a video just about that, but I decided to save that for the Crisis on Earth X crossover. So overall, the whole bit feels like a pretty much one story. It feels like a 3 hour and a half movie, even though it's in four separate parts, and even though the first part, you can tell that the first part is a Supergirl episode because they do spend a bit of time about the relationship they had with their the relationship Supergirl had with Mon-El and how that fell apart, the relationship that Alex had with Maggie and how that fell apart. So basically, they're feeling pretty miserable. So that's pretty much their storyline throughout the episode, them getting over their lost love and convincing themselves to go to the wedding, and of course the whole shebang that happens during the wedding. For the Arrow episode, basically you had the storyline with the whole bit between Oliver and Merlin, and also the drama between Oliver and Felicity, that Oliver was almost suggesting that they get married, and Felicity saying that she doesn't want to get married. So again, you have a whole bit of even though the episode showcases a lot of characters and characters from all the TV shows, there are quite a few specific storylines that make it feel pretty much like an Arrow episode. For the Flash episode, there's a whole bit of the episode that happens in Starlab. And also there's that's probably the one episode that doesn't really feel specific to the Flash, but because the whole crossover pretty much is a little Flash centric with the wedding and the whole storyline throughout the whole crossover. The whole crossover seems pretty much centered around Barry and Iris and the whole wedding bit, even though there's a whole bunch of Nazi parts to that. And the last episode, which is the Legends of Tomorrow episode, does feature a few of the legends that we hadn't seen really before. Like we see the Atom who comes in, we see Commander Steel who comes in, and then we see the whole showdown. And a good chunk of the showdown is the Wave Rider fighting the evil version of the Wave Rider. So there's a few bits that are somewhat, and of course the whole bit between Martenstein and Jackson. So there's quite a few bits that feel pretty much like a Legend of Tomorrow episodes, even though it includes pretty much everyone. So pretty much the global storyline is pretty much Barry and Iris getting married, and the evil Nazis trying to take over the evil Nazis from Earth X trying to take over Earth One, and the evil Supergirl needing Supergirl's heart to be able to stay alive. And at the very end, they do something they did pretty much last year also. Basically, the Arrow TV show is what started the whole CW superhero shows, and the Flash is pretty much their most popular show right now, from what I understand. So last year when they ended the crossover with a nice little scene between just Barry and Oliver. And this year they more or less did the same, but with a few extra characters. Like you had Barry, Oliver, Iris, and Felicity, and they even included Diggle. So basically, we had the team that started the whole thing in Arrow with Oliver, Felicity, and Diggle, and we had the two main characters of their most popular show with Iris and Barry, and that they pretty much ended that and they ended the whole crossover with those characters as some sort of bookend to the crossover. So again, I really enjoyed that crossover. By far the best episodes we had in a long time. And again, just seeing Firestorm once more, it had been way too long since we had seen Firestorm. And sadly, I guess it'll take at least a while before we see Firestorm again. I guess we're going to have to wait for that. It is sad to see Martin Stein leave the show. He was one of the great characters from the show, but what can you do? Maybe he'll make an appearance from time to time. Same as Captain Cold. For some reason, Captain Cold didn't want to be a series regular. Maybe he's too busy in his regular life or something. So once in a while, we see Captain Cold appear here and there. And here at the end of the crossover, he decides to stay on Earth 1. So at least for a while, we will have the Captain Cold from Earth X who will be on Earth 1. And again, the crossover ends with pretty much their what you could consider their lead characters. Like last year, as I mentioned, it pretty much ended with Oliver and Barry, which these are pretty much the lead characters in those TV shows. But this year they expanded that to include Felicity, include Iris, and include Diggle into the mix. So that's pretty much it for now, guys. So again, it was a great crossover. If you're a big DC fan, I would strongly suggest you give it a try. Even if normally you don't like the CW TV shows, at least try this crossover. Try the whole crossover. I think you should be able to find at least some nice action adventure. If you're a fan of action adventure TV shows, you at least have some of that. If you're a fan of superheroes, at least you have some of that. And if you're a fan of the DC universe, you do have at least some of that also in that crossover. And that's going to be pretty much it for now, guys. So, as always, thanks for watching, and hopefully, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.